So today we're going to be doing Esther chapters 5 and 7. And the last time we talked, we left kind of in a cliffhanger because we had Esther who was preparing by fasting 3 days and 3 nights with all of her attendants to go into the king unrequested. And Mordecai, her cousin uncle who had raised her, also with all the Jews in the province, are also fasting for her for these 3 days and 3 nights, because when she goes into this king unrequested, she can be put to death if he does not hold out his scepter to her. And it's kind of the inverse of what we saw with his first wife, Queen Vashti. He had requested her to come, and she refused to come to that party of all the men. And in this case, we have Queen Esther going in unrequested and having a huge penalty. And I am sure that she spent a lot of time preparing for this time to come into the court of the palace. I'm sure she wore the most beautiful dress that she knew he liked. Or she had her hair done just so. She wore the jewelry that he most appreciated. I'm sure she spent hours getting ready in order to go in to see him. And so when she walks in, the Bible tells us that the king's heart, he had favor on her. And he extended his scepter, and he says to her, Queen Esther, he calls her Queen Esther, what is your request? What is it, Queen Esther, that you need? It will be given to you, even to half of my kingdom. And as she approaches, she says, if it pleases the king, if I have found favor in your sight, why don't you and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for you? And the king says, go get Haman quickly, because we're going to Esther's for a feast today. And as they were drinking wine, the king says to her at the feast, Queen Esther, what is your request? What is it that you would like? I will give it to you, even to half my kingdom. And I'm sure Haman is sitting there going, this is kind of weird that I'm invited all of a sudden to a feast, because who knows where he was or what he was doing when the king sent somebody to say, go quickly and get Haman, because we're going to a feast at Esther's. And she says, if I found favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition, come with Haman tomorrow to another feast that I will prepare for you. And the king agreed to do that. I had mentioned in a previous chapter that the heart of a king, the Bible tells us, is like water in the hands of God. He can turn it any which way he wants. And no matter how much his treasury has, how wealthy he is, or how extensive his kingdom, how powerful his armies are, our God can handle anyone. And Esther, who doesn't know how things are going to evolve after she goes in, when the king simply says, what is on your mind? What is troubling you? He even goes further and he says, just name it, Queen Esther. I will give you anything up to half of my kingdom. And that is her moment, the moment that she could have brought the roof down on Haman, but she doesn't, not yet. This is a wise woman who understands timing. She is not in a hurry, nor is she full of revenge. Instead, she has been waiting on the Lord. She has taken 3 days of fasting, surrounded by all of her attendants and all the Jews in the kingdom. And isn't it true that when we get in a hurry, when we don't wait on the Lord, when we jump ahead, that we do rash things, we just go in and shoot from the hip, we run off at the mouth saying things that we later regret, but once those words are out there, they're out there. And Esther says instead, if it pleases the king, you and Haman come to a banquet I've prepared for you tomorrow. Isn't that incredible? While she has been fasting these 3 days, along with every attendant in her household, she has also been preparing a banquet. And that presents enormous control. If you've ever dieted, you know what I'm talking about, because your flesh is screaming out for food. Even if you're not hungry, you're thinking about everything and all those commercials on TV. And the king says, this is a great idea, Esther. Haman and I will come tomorrow to the banquet, because you know parties are my thing. You understand I like banquets and celebrating. And the king says to Haman, we are going to do as Esther desires. So the king made a rule in Persia that Haman signed with the king's edict. But it is the Lord we're going to see that is in charge of this entire situation. And in his divine plan, Esther and the Jews are going to be invincible. Esther has a sensitive ear. She's got a wise heart, because she senses something is not quite right when she goes in this first time. So she doesn't push. She knows the right moment to act is going to come, and she knew to wait. Are we as sensitive as that? So Haman goes out that day joyful, the Bible says, and I am sure he could not wait to get home to tell his wife and friends, you know what, I was on this other thing, and the king and Esther requested me to come to a feast tonight. He, I'm sure, was ecstatic. And then it says, but when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, so he's on his way home, and he notices Mordecai at the king's gate, and he did not pay him homage or bow to him. And he was filled with rage against Mordecai. He's got all of this good news, and he's letting this one thing really bother him. And it says Mordecai was not harmed because Haman restrained himself and he went home. In other words, he's like, it's not worth my time to kill just you. I am going to get rid of all of you. So he goes home and he recounts to his wife and friends, the Bible says, and the number of his sons, all the promotions which the king had honored him with. Don't you have a friend like that who can call you up and tell you all these fantastic things going on in their lives and just bragging about everything, and they don't give you time to say anything good that's happening in your life? And then he says to them, but there is this one thing that no matter what, when I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate, it just infuriates me that he will not bow or pay me homage because I have a lot of pride and everybody needs to notice me. So his wife, Zeresh, says to him, and all of his friends do, hey, build a gallows 50 cubits high. And in the morning, go in to tell the king to have Mordecai hanged on those gallows. And then joyfully you can go to the feast with the king that night. And that idea pleased Haman. So we're about to see the most significant principle of all, which is what goes around comes around. There's karma. The Bible says you reap what you sow. And we'd be tempted to think that God is absent in this, but that's hardly the case because his fingerprints are all over this wonderful story. We see God's hand moving in the life of Esther and in Mordecai, where they are positioned in direct contact with the king. And we see that the heart of King Xerxes Ahasuerus, we see him as he works his own will, even though it's through a wicked plot that Haman took advantage of the king. And when we come to chapter 3, we see and witness a sustained period of silence during which Haman is promoted to second in the land. And we watch Haman lay the groundwork to exterminate all the Jews in the entire kingdom of Persia. We watched as the official seal of the king was pressed into that soft clay, the edict of death that goes forth through all the provinces, 127 provinces, from Ethiopia to India, all these different races, these different languages, and we think, oh my goodness, God, stop this wrong. But there is nothing happening yet. Where is God? Where is he? But it's in these periods of silence that God is at work. And if you don't know this, if you don't believe this, if you don't remember this when he is silent, you begin to panic because you begin to doubt. You become cynical, resentful, brimming with bitterness. Nothing is coincidence. Luck has no place in the vocabulary of a Christian. In his time, and only in his time, the time of God, does he begin to move in the perfect time. And then suddenly it breaks forth his surprising sovereignty. It unfolds and a change occurs. Don't fight it. It's God's way to lift us up. So on that night, the king can't sleep. Isn't it funny how God works? And he says to the couriers, go get the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles. And they were read before the king. He's reading something so boring about how many bushels of this are paid, what happened here. And it comes to the story about Mordecai stopping the assassination of the king by overhearing Bigthana and Teresh's plan to kill the king. And the king's jolted awake and he says, hold on, what was done? What honor or distinction was bestowed on Mordecai for doing this? And the king's attendant says, nothing. We didn't do anything for him. And the king says, hey, who's out there in the court right now? And Haman had arrived early because all night long he's got this banging going on, building these gallows 50 cubits high, which means everybody is going to be able to see Mordecai hanging on that gallows, and he's going to go in and make this happen. And the king calls, Haman, come into the court. I want to talk to you for a minute. And he says, what should be done to the man who the king delights in? And Haman thinks to himself, this is the danger of pride. Who in the kingdom would the king want to honor more than Mordecai? Not Mordecai, more than me. And who stands in a better spot than me with the king? I am second in charge. So Haman apparently had been thinking about, one day this is how I want to be treated, because he immediately says to the king, quote, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden be brought, and on the head a crown placed, and let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most notable nobles, and let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. And the king says, you know what, Haman, that's a great idea. So hurry, take my robes and the horse, just as you've said, and do to Mordecai the Jew everything that you have suggested. Can you even imagine the horror that Haman is now feeling? He is going to have to do all of this for Mordecai the Jew, who he had just wanted to hang on the gallows. And survival is about mastering yourself, your fear response, being able to think and act while keeping your panic at bay, being able to navigate your mental and physical response to fear is your number one survival skill. It can also be your best ally in any intimidating situation that life throws your way. Managing your fear requires a deliberate act of courage. It is a choice that you make. It is a choice that everyone is capable of making. I used to tell my grandchildren that courage does not mean that you don't have fear. Instead, it's doing what needs to be done while you are afraid. That is courage. Instead, God says to us, fear not. I am with you. You can do the right thing. I will turn things that are meant for evil against you for good. Stay focused on me. I am your refuge. I am your fortress. I am your God in whom you trust. So Mordecai returns to the king's gate, and Haman runs to his house in mourning. What a difference from yesterday, running to tell all his friends and his family about the celebration. But he's still got this dinner tonight. And I'm sure he's not thinking about that after this horror of him having to put Mordecai on the horse and lead him through the square in the king's garb, yelling, thus shall it be done to the man who delights the king. And so his wise men and his wife Zeresh say to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him. but you will surely fall before him. At any moment from that time, Haman could have repented and changed course. He could have immediately ordered, what am I thinking? What you all suggested yesterday was wrong. Just go tear the gallows down. But he didn't. And when faced with a situation in which you are being provoked, whether it's by other people or a spiritual attack from Satan, we have to take a moment to let our emotions pass and then ask, do I really need to respond to this? Seeking the God's of all knowledge face. Assess the situation from a logical vantage point, not an emotional one, and base your decision on ultimately what is going to benefit you, but glorify God in the long run. And the best way to manage fear is preparation. It isn't hiding from the things we're afraid of, it's facing them straight on, taking responsibility and giving ourselves the tools and the knowledge that we need to manage any situation that might come our way. So while Haman is at the house talking with his family and friends about what a horrible day this has been, the king's eunuchs arrive and they hurry Haman to the feast. The king and Haman go in, and as they are drinking wine at the feast, the king again says to Esther, "What is your request?" "What is it, my queen? I will give it to you, even to half of my kingdom. It will be fulfilled." And the queen says, "If I have found favor in your sight, if I am precious to you, O king, then grant my request, for I have been sold and my people too, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated." And honestly, if we had just been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent. For our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king. And King Ahasuerus is like, Queen Esther, who is he and where is he who dare to take your life and the life of your people? And she says, "A foe, my king, an enemy, the wicked Haman." And Haman then, the Bible tells us, is terrified before the king and the queen. Can you even imagine? His day has gone from bad to even worse. And the question we have to ask is, are we in tune sufficiently enough to read subtle signals? It is easy to jump at the first sighting of a fog lifting. Esther, though trapped in fog-bound silence for all of these days, that has such limited sight, had not told all she had on her heart because the time wasn't right. She sensed that. And it wasn't until this very moment that she shared with the king she is a Jew. But now the right moment had arrived to break the silence. Solomon had said, "There is a time for every event under heaven, a time to be silent and a time to speak." And silence, once appropriate, was no longer. And one wonders if Esther's heart is not beating in her throat as she realized her nation's future, the very balance of all these people, stood on the next few words that she would speak. Talk about the power of a woman. Can you believe Esther was so diplomatic and sensitive, even in the midst of pleading for the life and the lives of her people? If they had only been sold into slavery, she wouldn't have said anything and troubled you, O king, with this matter. Because you've got so many important things to worry about. I would not have bothered you. But he wants to annihilate us. Esther beautifully portrays in this moment the character quality of greatness and magnanimity. Her husband is now all ears. And King Ahasuerus says, Queen Esther, when he says, who is he? Where is he who dares to take the life of the queen and her people? And at this point, I confess my response might have been like, what do you mean, who is he? You were the one that allowed this Haman to sign the heinous edict. You gave him the seal to do this. What do you mean, who is he? Open up your eyes, husband. But thankfully, I wasn't there to blow it because we live in a world of preoccupied people living in a fog. Who knows how many edicts Ahasuerus has signed? And so she understood and acknowledged in her heart that the king had doubtless thousands of decisions to make, and Haman, who was a trusted official, had proposed this in such a way that it seemed like solving a problem to the king and doing the good to the kingdom. So the king probably signed it without giving much attention to detail, believing that Haman, a man who he trusted, knew what he was doing. And suddenly, everything is changed. And don't ever try to convince me that any situation in life is absolutely permanent. God can move the heart of a king. He can move an entire nation. He can bring down the once impenetrable Iron Curtain. He changes the mind of a stubborn mate. He can move in the affairs of a community. He can alter decisions of presidents and prime ministers and present-day kings and national leaders. No barrier is too high. No chasm is too wide for him, because he is not limited by time or space, by the visible or by the invisible. He lives in a realm that transcends all. He is all powerful. And when God is ready to move, he moves. And when he does, hang on, because you're in for the ride of your life. Realizing that her moment had arrived, Esther did not stammer. She did not hesitate. She said, a foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman. Haman became terrified before the king and Queen Esther. That's Esther 7, verse 6. The king rose in his wrath, and he went into the palace garden because he needs a moment to think this through. And Haman stayed with the queen to beg her for his life, because he knew that harm was determined against him by the king. He knew the king was furious. So the king comes back inside from the palace garden where they had been drinking wine, and Haman had fell on Esther on the couch. And the king, who was already really angry, is now absolutely livid. And he says, will you even assault the queen in my presence, in my own house? Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance, advanced and said, "King, there are gallows erected that Haman had built to hang Mordecai on, and they're standing at Haman's house 50 cubit high." And the king says, "Hang him on that gallows." And they hanged Haman on that gallows prepared for Mordecai. Then the wrath of the king was abated. Esther had masterfully put the case that Haman, O king, is a traitor to you as well as an enemy of the Jews. And she points out that Haman senses her triumph and knows the terror that is about to happen. And Esther's words to the king were an eye-opener for him because he had not known of Esther's nationality. And the realization that he had inadvertently allowed the life of his very precious Queen Esther was a knockout blow on top of everything that had happened. And rather than being frightened by the sovereignty of God, I am comforted by it. He alone is God. Since He, our God, does all things well, and in doing only good as His goal, how can I do anything but embrace it? Does this mean I can explain this? No, most of the time in hindsight, we get a little bit of insight, but does that mean that I always anticipate it? No, because I occasionally do rush to judgment. I respond in panic. I wonder, why are you so silent, allowing wrong to run a course for so long? But looking back in my more reasonable, logical moments, with my emotions under better control, I can see what God was about. I can even see why He delayed or why He acted the way that He did. And usually, I freely admit to you, I think God is awfully slow. I can't count the number of times that I have pleaded, "Oh God, please hurry up." And I'm usually surprised, though I shouldn't be, at how beautifully things work out. Esther is a beautiful picture of magnanimity. She is able to see the greater things and act on them. She's able to be humble and have simplicity in the challenge of life and for her people. She had holy simplicity, a meekness. She did not act rashly. She took time to fast and prepare a plan of action. God directed her thoughts. She was able in the court of the king to not say her petition, but to hold her peace at that first banquet because she knew in her heart that the time just wasn't right. She might be viewed as a weakling, a young woman in the palace of the king, but she was not afraid to do great things because she had magnanimity of soul. And where does magnanimity come from? It comes from an anointing, a leading of the Holy Spirit, a sensitive spirit to follow the movement of the eye of God. We too are filled with the Holy Spirit and we sense God. We know that He tells us, "My sheep hear my voice, and another they will not follow." I believe Esther realized that she was in her place exactly as Mordecai had told her for such a time as this. God is not a respecter of persons. He uses broken people, for all the earth is filled with broken people. And we too are able to stand against evil We too have authority over the evil spirits working behind the scenes in life and society. We have to believe that God is greater than our feelings, greater than our past, greater than our failures. Do not be afraid of your greatness, for deep down, we all know that we are made in the image of God. There is greatness in us, but we're afraid because we don't want to take the risk. We have to step out in faith to do great things. We have to get out on the water like Peter and walk. We fear what others are going to say. We might look like a fool at first. We may have failures along the way. We need to do the things that we are created to do. Humble people care what God thinks. They are childlike. They don't worry about what others think. They do the things that God puts on their heart, showing kindness to others. They're willing to offer personal suffering in order to bring others to Christ. The things can be done in quiet, they can be anonymous things. But being magnanimous means that you are humble and sensitive. You are made for greatness. You were created in the image of God. You could have been born at any time in history, but God chose this time right now for you. So live today fully, knowing that you were created for such a time as this. And you, my friends, have a mission to accomplish that no one else in this world can do. Be blessed, my friends.